The wind that pressed against the crimson and gold banners of the Red Keep carried the briny tang of Blackwater Bay, and, deeper still, the far-off scent of early winter, the sharp iron fragrance that reminded Robert Baratheon of nights upon the wall, long before the crown pressed grooves into his brow. He stood at an arched window high in Maegor's Holdfast, the cool morning air prickling the stubble on his cheeks. Below, King's Landing roused itself in sluggish layers. Dock workers shouting about bales of Taroshi silk, fishwives clattering pans, the faint thud of soldiers' boots on cobblestone. All of it pulsed, alive and raw, yet Robert felt apart from it, as though he were a ghost watching a life he might have led had he not sworn to conquer kingdoms and drown his memories in Arbor Red. But the Arbor Red was gone now. Every last cask rolled out of the cellars by his own command, shattered on the muddy slope behind the gatehouse, so the wine soaked into the dust and stank of sour grapes. Even the scent of it nauseated him. For moons he had clutched each dawn like a rung of burning iron, just to haul himself out of the pit into which he had happily tumbled. The maesters said the poison had worked through his liver so thoroughly that the next indulgence would split the organ like a bursting wineskin. He believed them. The boar's tusks, deep in his gut, had done less damage than years of revels. Now, sober and scourged by his own conscience, Robert could no longer ignore the letters that stacked in pale towers upon the council table. Ravens spoke of dead men walking beyond the wall, of a frozen god-king with eyes of burning frost, of wildling villages butchered and left to freeze in grotesque poses. In the deep hours, when he rubbed the scars on his belly and listened to the gnawing of the fire in his hearth, Robert remembered Benjen Stark's voice from decades past. "Summer flies as swift as arrows, your grace. Winter never tires in." He had laughed then, drunk on victory and youth. Now he shuddered at the echo. Footsteps approached, the measured, deliberate tread of Lord Stannis. Robert did not turn. He watched gulls dive at sleek dolphins twisting among the galleys, and wondered whether the dragons of old had cut the same bright arcs in the sky before Valyria drowned in ash. "You wish to see me, brother?" Stannis asked. He always stood as though carved from the same block of granite that built Storm's End, lean and rigid, a man paired to duty alone. "Aye." Robert's voice, once booming, had softened these past moons, growing hoarse where merriment used to roar. "Send your clerks to count every sword and spear King's Landing can spare. We shall march north before the first true snows." "Then himself." The silence between them stretched, taut as a drawn bow. Stannis' jaw tightened. "You would abandon the capital? The Crown lands will whisper treason the moment your shadow crosses the Trident." Robert snorted. "Let them whisper. Every whisper dies in the gale when winter breaks their doors." He finally turned, and Stannis almost flinched at the fervor blazing behind his brother's eyes. "I dreamed last night," Robert went on, voice low. Ned stood on a field of ice beneath a black sky. Ghosts closed round him, pale as the dead fish in Flea Bottom's markets. He called my name, but the wind swallowed it. I will not leave his son to fight such darkness alone. "Then, Bran Stark holds Winterfell with Lady Catelyn beside him," Stannis replied, though doubt flitted behind his steely gaze. "The North is not leaderless." "The boy is 10, Robert snarled, though anger cost him breath. "And Catelyn was ever brave, but courage is no shield against legends risen from snow. Jon Snow serves in the Night's Watch. The Black Brothers are few as crows in drought." He gripped the windowsill, thick fingers whitening. "I was too blind to heed their words. I will make amends." Stannis inhaled, his eyes shifting to the sea far below. "You speak of a crusade." The word tasted old and perilous on the air. Robert nodded. "No." In the small council chamber, the torches guttered, cleansing the daylight with coils of saffron smoke. Grand Maester Gorman reached for a sandglass, turned it, and sat with quills balanced behind each ear. Around the table, lords and ladies traded uneasy glances. Varys, swathed in lavender silk, folded his soft hands as though in prayer. Renly twirled his beard thoughtfully. It had grown longer of late, as though he wished to emulate their father's legendary mane. Robert leaned forward, knuckles cracking. "The Night King is no rumor." He is ice given hunger, and hunger given command. My ravens speak of villages evacuated, of shadows moving in moonlight without heartbeat or breath. The wall cannot stand alone. We ride for Winterfell, come fortnight's end. Menetrind. Your Grace, Gorman said, the tremor in his voice muffled by academic courtesy. If the tales are true, no host in horsehair and chainmail can match such sorcery. Dragonglass, old texts claim. Then we mine dragonglass, Robert cut in. The vaults of Dragonstone still hold seams of it. Lord Stannis will sail there at once and carve the island's bones bare. I want spearheads and arrow points enough to sting a winter storm. And who, Renly interjected, will guard the realm in your absence? Balcony whispers are hungry mouths. They devour order at the first scent of weakness. Ban. Robert looked to his youngest brother, eyes softening. You shall remain in King's Landing, Renly. You have charm enough to soothe a serpent and a mind sharper than most give credit. Keep the city's heart beating. I trust you. Surprise flickered across Renly's face, quickly masked by a courtly bow. Sir Jaime Lannister, Robert continued, turning toward the Kingslayer's gold-clad figure. The Kingsguard rides north with me. I will have the realm see its finest swords measure themselves against the abyss. Dan. Jaime inclined his head, a smile half-knife, half-sunlight. I have always fancied testing my mettle against legends, Your Grace. Across the polished wood, Varys' painted whisper floated. May I humbly suggest ravens to Old Town and Lys? The Citadel's higher mysteries concerning cold and shadow might provide peculiar aids. Do it, Robert said. And 10 days later, the column wound from King's Landing like a steel serpent, banners snapping against a pewter sky. Robert rode at its head, astride a warhorse black as midnight, the steed's hooves drumming a cadence that set sparrows flocking from hedgerows. He wore no crown, only a stripped leather helm and a bare pelt cloak that smelled of pine. The Iron Throne weighed upon him still, but it was absent from his shoulders in those moments, replaced by an older mantle. Robert, the Warhammer, Storm's Fury. At his right hand rode Sir Jaime, cloak gleaming white, hair a more brilliant gold than Lannister banners. Behind them marched 3,000 gold-cloaked spearmen. Further back, smoldering coffers of wildfire, caged by iron, rolled upon stout wagons, Tyrion Lannister's reluctant parting gift, devised while cursing every fool who thought verdant flame could defeat the cold. Yet wildfire burned no colder than dragons' hearts once had, Robert reasoned. As they passed the abandoned holdfasts of the Riverlands, homes still charred from the War of 5 Kings, Robert listened for children's laughter, for roosters crowing, any sign of the world he had bled to build. Instead, he heard the hush of omen. Leaves already showed veins of silver. Geese fled south in crooked ranks. The sky bleached itself of warmth. On the twisting bridge above the Green Fork, they met the silent procession that joined them from the east. Knights of the Vale beneath Moonhound Falcon pennants, bronze-armored men of House Royce, and high-born lords on spotless coursers. Lord Nestor Royce bowed from the saddle, his lined face solemn. The Lord of the Eyrie sends 300 knights to your banner, Your Grace, and thrice that in Mendhut Carms. Young Lord Robert Arryn bids me tell you he shall pray nightly for your triumph. Down. Robert's tooth-bare grin seemed carved into his beard. Prayers are well and good, Lord Nestor, but steel is better. Ride with me, and may the gods match our courage. They clattered onward north. Rivers swelled, then froze at their edges. Merchants turned their wagons south at sight of the host, muttering about wolves and colder specters. In the twilight just beyond Moat, Kaelin's towering stone causeways, a Shebir ambled into their torchlight, regard as assessing as any lords. She remained until the last baggage cart creaked past, then melted into darkness like a silent sentinel. Winterfell's walls loomed higher than memory allowed, frosted with hoarfrost like powdered chalk. Bran Stark, small and thin and regal in a sable cloak, waited in the courtyard flanked by Maester Luwin and a line of grim guards. With him stood Jon Snow, taller now, shoulders broad beneath crow-black wool. Robert dismounted, knees cracking, and knelt so Bran would not crane his neck. Snow swirled between them like drifting embers. "Your Grace," Bran said, voice steady despite the timid flutter in his blue eyes. "Winterfell is yours. It is yours, lad, and always will be." Robert's large hand engulfed Bran's forearm. "I vowed to your father I'd ride with him to the end of the world. The promise stands even if the man is gone." Behind Bran, Jon Snow inclined his head, that quiet shadow of Ned Stark's bearing. "The Watch thanks you," he murmured. "We are spread thin at the wall. Eastwatch has not seen fresh rations in 2 moons. Hardhome is silent." Robert rose, joints complaining. "Then we press on tomorrow. Winter has delayed long enough." Bentrander. That night in the Great Hall, the hearths were stoked with oak logs that hissed as snowmelt found flame. Robert supped on bread and beet stew, eschewing ale for boiled water laced with lemon. He listened while Benjen Stark's last letters were read aloud. Wildling scouts reporting pale riders that did not breathe. A weirwood grove south of the Frostfangs, where ravens perched inert, eyes filmed in ice. "We leave at dawn," Robert decreed. "But first, we honor the fallen." He led the lords and soldiers to the crypts beneath the castle. Torchlight chased spiders over chiseled granite kings. The statue of Eddard Stark, greatsword across his lap, seemed to watch Robert's every breath. The king placed 2 fingers to the cold stone hand. "I was not the brother you deserved," he whispered. "Forgive me, Ned." Somewhere beyond the crypts, wind moaned like a mother keening. And now, dawn broke pale and bloodless. The host marched from Winterfell into forests transformed. The pines that once dripped resin now stood petrified, boughs entombed in rime. Crows perched silently, eyes glimmering with unnatural reflection, unfazed when arrows hissed past to test their living state. 3 days north of Winterfell, near the Umber's last watchtower, the column reached a field sown with bodies. The corpses were fresh yet unspoiled, lying where they had bled. Pale faces stared skyward with eyes of swirling sapphire. Ser Jorah Mormont, riding ahead to scout, returned white-lipped. "They are not dead," he said. "Only waiting." Robert ordered a ring of torches planted around the field. Wildfire casks were unstoppered. When green flame engulfed the dead, their limbs jerked like puppets yanked on invisible string, mouths opening in silent screams. Yet the ice in their eyes did not melt. It shattered, showering sparks with prismatic frost. The living watched, breaths steaming, until charred bones collapsed on themselves. No cheer rose, only a grim hush. That night the men huddled by pit fires but left armor buckled, eyes scouring the distance. The screams came an hour before moonrise, soft at first, then crescendoing. They emanated from darkness and surrounding woods, echoing each voice among the living until every soldier thought he heard his mother, his comrade, his own throat begging mercy. Some men nearly broke ranks. Jaime strode the lines, white cloak whipping ash, shouting them back to courage with curses fit to peel bark. Robert Baratheon did not quail. He mounted his horse and rode between camps, a silhouette haloed by sparks, booming orders that bulwarked terror. "Hold fast! Remember the trident! Remember, Pike! No devil born of winter shall see you falter." Memshau. The wailing ceased at dawn like a hand snuffing a candle. Where fires had burned low, they found pits dug in the night. Shallow holes clawed in frozen earth, empty as unmarked graves. And now on the 9th day from Winterfell, the first flakes drifted, slow and deliberate. By midday the sky dumped white sheets that swallowed banners, muffled hoofbeats, choked breath. Visibility faded to arm's length. Ranks tightened. Scouts vanished into the swirl and did not return. "Storm from hell," muttered Gendry Waters, now Robert's armorer. Cheeks raw with cold, he hammered ice from a helm until the metal sang. At dusk the blizzard eased enough for torches to wink through gloom. Robert called a halt near the weeping river, a frozen ribbon that cracked like mirror glass beneath wagon wheels. Tents rose, flaps hammered down. Fires roared but warmth lingered only at their very edge. Robert slept little. In his command tent, he pored over maps with Jon Snow and Jorah Mormont. The wall, they judged, lay 2 marches ahead if weather held, and the frost fangs loomed beyond like jagged shark teeth. Rushing a siege on the elements would splinter the host. Snow suggested a series of supply caches beneath cairns, trailing back to Winterfell. If men lose the line of torches, markers will guide them home. Wise Robert agreed. Do it. The next morning dawned crisp, the blizzard gone as suddenly as it arrived, leaving an alien world. Trees were glass specimens, every branch glittered. Ahead, the sky above the wall shone pale turquoise, as if touched by sorcery. The king's host crested a ridgeline, and there it stood, an obsidian serpent stretched horizon to horizon. In the distance, atop its crest, torches burned blue as moonstone. Castle Black calling out to the southern realm. A horn gruel drifted over the snow. Low, tremulous, mournful. A second call followed, then a third. Jon Snow's skin blanched. Brothers call. They are under attack. Robert wheeled his horse, voice ringing. Spears forward. Double pace. Ride. The crusade surged, a roaring avalanche of metal and will. Behind Robert, wildfire barrels clanked. Arrows glittered with dragonglass shards. Voices clashed in raw song. The ground quaked under thousands of boots. And on the wall, amid serpents of icy mist, shapes moved, ragged silhouettes clambering over the parapets, some bearing torches that shone blue, others trailing shadows darker than moonless night. Robert saw none of this in detail. He felt it in marrow, felt the cold humming with promises of oblivion. He spurred his horse harder, breath pouring in clouds. "End, old friend," he thought. "Watch me now." He did not realize tears froze on his beard. Now. When they reached Castle Black's gate, the watchmen inside looked like revenants themselves. Faces gaunt, eyes wild. Sir Denys Mallister approached, cheeks hollow. "Your Grace," he rasped. They came at dawn. Dozens of wights, a handful of white walkers, testing stones, probing weaknesses. "We held, but they will come again, and we shall greet them," Robert said. He dismounted and strode to the lift, ignoring the protest of knees. Jaime joined him, helm under arm. Jon Snow followed, dark eyes glittering. The three rose above the world on a creaking cage of wood and rope, wind slapping their cloaks. When platform met ice, their boots crunched. Below, the host spread like ants, dwarfed by the immensity of the wall, yet each soul shone against the snow. Robert stepped to the parapet, looking north. The land beyond lay flat and endless, a desert of white, dotted by black flecks where forests clawed at sky. Somewhere amid that waste marched the Night King. He stood watching, breath coiling. The silence was profound. No gulls, no river, no distant marketplaces. Only the heart-deep knowledge of primal cold. Jaime spoke quietly, for once stripped of irony. "Do you still fear no man?" "I fear failing," Robert answered. "I fear ghosts of duty undone." Jon Snow placed a dragonglass dagger on the ice. "Then we will not fail." The horn sounded again, not 3 blasts but 1, echoing like a death knell. Riders emerging from the distant tree line approached. Swift as storm clouds, their mounts skeletal elk, undead horses, creatures warped by winter, kicked up powder in swirling vortices. At their fore rode a figure carved of hoarfrost, crown of icy antlers curling from a skull-white brow. Eyes burned with imprisoned stars. Robert's throat constricted. The Night King did not raise a hand, did not speak. Yet Robert felt the challenge as plainly as steel against skin. He turned to Jaime and Jon. "Prepare the men. Tonight we show these snowborn wraiths the fury of living fire." He descended the lift, each footstep resounding. One mortal man, bruised by regrets, tempered by pain, bearing a warhammer that had felled crown and kin alike. The wind howled across the ramparts. Afternoon, bled into amber dusk. Fires dotted the courtyard, men shaping dragonglass into arrowheads, fletchers binding raven-black shafts, blacksmiths coaxing last warmth from steel. The smell of pitch, pine, and sweat mingled. Priests of the Seven whispered blessings. A red priestess newly arrived from Volantis traced symbols in ash, her crimson hair aflame in torchlight. Robert visited each station, pausing to clap shoulders, share quiet words. He found Gendry near a forge, shaping a warhammer's new head, a bronze-faceted weapon cunningly inlaid with veins of obsidian. "For you, your grace," Gendry said, awe betraying him. Dragonglass at the striking faces. "Shatter bone. Strew frost." Robert hefted it. The hammer felt alive, a low hum vibrating through the haft, like a caged thunderclap. He remembered forging songs of storms end long ago, his laughter drowning anvil clang. Now the music rang grave and resolute. As the sun kissed the horizon, purple streaks unraveled above the wall. A hush fell. The Night King's host emerged from the north, in disciplined ranks, silent, symmetrical, endless. Whites bristling with spears of hoarfrost, giants frozen, wolves of ice padding alongside. Among them strode the White Walkers, gaunt and regal, blades of crystal swirling mist. Robert strode to the courtyard's center, his breath condensing in a halo. The men looked to him, eyes wide. He raised the warhammer high. "Look well, lads," he bellowed. "These shadows seek to smother the songs of our children, the heat of hearths, the very taste of autumn apples. They believe life is but a fleeting spark. Tonight we prove the spark may become wildfire." Then a roar erupted, ragged, desperate, magnificent. Arrows knocked, spears leveled, wildfire pots lifted. On the wall, Jon Snow and a cadre of watch archers took positions behind crenellations. Jaime Lannister led the Kingsguard along the southern stairs, blades ready to plug breaches. Stannis' fleet, anchored at Eastwatch, prepared scorpions tipped with obsidian. Twilight swallowed the last warmth. Frost edged Robert's beard silver. He exhaled once, feeling the weight of Ned, Lyanna, Rhaegar, Renly's smile, all ghosts of roads not chosen, pressing lightly on his shoulders. The Night King lifted one hand. Silence. Then, without trumpet or drum, the dead advanced. And they collided with the living in a cacophony of shattering ice and rending steel. Wildfire burst in emerald blooms, incinerating ranks of whites, but leaving White Walkers striding through flame, frost trailing their cloaks in hissing steam. Robert swung his warhammer into a snarling corpse, dragonglass fracturing spine and skull in a single blow. He felt marrow crunch, felt the uncanny light vanish from its eyes. Another lunged. He pivoted, hammerhead spinning, vapor jetting from ruptured ribs. Jaime cut in fast arcs, white cloak soon smeared with blackened ichor. He laughed. Exhilaration edged manic. Beside him, a Kingsguard lost an arm to a frostblade. He fell without cry, lips already blue. Jon Snow, atop the wall, loosed arrow after arrow, each obsidian tip finding bone, banishing life where no life resided. Yet the dead continued, climbing ladders of screaming flesh, dragging themselves even as limbs separated. A giant white hurled itself at the gate. Its shoulder burst, but the creature kept battering, teeth gnashing. Robert spied the Night King standing still amid the carnage, blue gaze fixed upon him alone. An unspoken invitation. Robert pushed forward, every sinew burning. He battered aside two walkers, dragonglass exploding their blades into vapor. The Night King drew a crystal sword, frost dancing along its length. Around them, time seemed to slow. Snowflakes suspending mid-air like motes in dream. Robert's boots creaked on frozen mud. He circled, hammer raised. Memories flashed unbidden. Lyanna's laugh among winter roses, his father's heavy hand on his shoulder, Ned's quiet wisdom, the thrill of first victory. Each memory warmed him. The Night King struck, blade humming. Robert parried with the hammer's haft, shock numbing his arms. Again and again they traded blows. ice shrieking, bronze ringing. Blue light clashed golden sparks. Around them the battle ebbed, warriors forming a ragged circle, mesmerized by the duel. Robert feinted left, pivoted, drove the hammer's dragonglass face at the Night King's flank. For an instant he felt contact. Crystal armor cracked, frost splintering. The Night King recoiled, a hiss like winter squall, yet no scream. Again Robert's mind roared. He swung with all the weight of love and fury and loss. The world shattered white, and under. Robert knelt in snow, churned pink. The Night King lay broken before him, crystalline chest caved where dragonglass lodged. Blue flames within his eyes guttered, flickered, died. A tremor ran across the battlefield. The front wave of white staggered, limbs twitching. Cracks binded ice armor. One by one they froze in place, then collapsed like thawing statues. A roar built from human throats, ragged jubilation rising into night. Yet Robert found no triumph. He sank to both knees, chest heaving. The warhammer slipped from numb fingers. Exhaustion hollowed him. Blood dripped from a cut at his brow. Jon Snow arrived first, ripping off a gauntlet to grasp Robert's shoulder. "You did it," he breathed. Robert managed a faint smile. "We did," he corrected, though the word rasped. Jaime swaggered closer, limping, white cloak half-burned. "By the gods, you stubborn stag, I thought no man could out-swagger death itself." Robert laughed, or tried. The sound came wet. He raised a hand but saw his palm stained crimson. The Night King's blade, he now realized, had found his ribs on that final exchange. Cold seeped inward like creeping dawn. He looked skyward. Snow drifted gently, washed in moonlight. "Tell Renly, I always loved him, fool that he is." He coughed. "Tell Cersei." He paused, confusion creasing his brow. Then he chuckled. "No, let her decide what I'd say." Jon gripped him tighter. "Maesters." "No time," Robert murmured. "But hear me. Hold fast to life. Rule not through swords but hearth fires. Winter passes." His gaze lost focus, settling somewhere beyond. Jon's voice cracked. "Your Grace." Robert Baratheon expelled a breath and did not draw another. "None." Dawn broke pale rose, kissing shards of ice that once walked. Survivors stood in stunned silence upon a field of stillness. The body of the Night King lay inert, sword melted into puddles of glass. The true winter receded, like a tide granted new respect, though snow would linger in memory. Jaime Lannister knelt to close Robert's eyes, fingers gentle. Jon Snow collected the warhammer, its obsidian edges chipped, and held it skyward so first light shone through fragments like stars. The crowd bowed heads. Bran Stark arrived at noon, carried in a wicker chair. He touched Robert's cooling brow, his young face grave with centuries of knowledge that no boy should bear. "He gave the realm a dawn," Bran whispered. And so the Crusade's trumpet fell silent. Fires burned the dead, white and man alike, until stench joined the wind's lament. Ravens bore word south that the Night King was fallen, and the king with him. Across Westeros, mothers held children closer, and lords pondered the weight of crowns compared to the price of courage. Yet somewhere in the farthest north, beneath a glacier older than men's ancestors, a faint glow ignited, blue, weak but growing, and winter, though beaten, waited with patient hunger. And there, far to the south, in the Red Keep's Godswood courtyard, Renly Baratheon received the raven at dusk. He read the parchment once, twice, then turned to the white weirwood whose face bled red sap. "Brother," he said softly, tears running, "you always chased storms." He folded the letter, slipping it inside a breast pocket lined with green silk, and strode toward the Tower of the Hand. There were banners to lower, an heir to proclaim, and a realm to remind that dawn is forged by mortal hands. As he walked, Renly swore he felt the ground hum. Not ominous, but reverent, like a giant's heartbeat echoing through stone. He straightened his shoulders, inhaled salt and flame carried on the evening breeze. and promised the gods he would keep that heartbeat alive. And somewhere, beneath drifting snowflakes mingled with far-off summer dust, Robert Baratheon's laughter rolled like thunder across a waking world. Aika. PGSQL. Smoke curled like dark ribbons through the pre-dawn chill, carrying the scent of pine resin, scorched leather, and sweet fat crackling on distant pyres. Though the battle had ended a full day earlier, Castle Black's yard still trembled with low hammer blows as armorers straightened battered plate and re-riveted rent mail. Jon Snow moved among the survivors without speaking, his fingers brushing the haft of Robert's warhammer where it rode across his back. Dragon glass sparkled in the weapon's cracked faces, a starlight sheen that refused to dim even as ash drifted down like black snow. Every clang set nerves quivering. Men flinched at shadows. The silence that followed each strike felt too much like the hush before another horn. Within the old timber hall, Maester Aemon's candle gutters played ghosts along the walls. Jorah Mormont stood with his arms folded, the bare sigil on his cloak half burned away, deep lines etched beside eyes once quick to grin. "The king saved us," he said at last, voice gravel roughened by smoke. But salvation cut out its own heart. No one answered. Even the torches seemed to bow their flames lower, reluctant to disturb the hush that had settled since Robert Baratheon's last breath. They bore the king's body south as dawn bruised the sky, bound upon a sledge of black oak and white surcoat. Bran rode at the head of the procession in a wicker throne, strapped to a massive gray horse, whose hooves drummed solemn cadence. The boy's expression had become something older than grief, as if the weirwood's faces now shared space behind his eyes. Jon walked beside the bier on foot, cloak whipping, snowflakes searing cheeks raw. Each step southward felt like a betrayal of the brothers still patching gaps atop the wall, but promises bound him to this duty. He had told Robert in those last breaths that he would see the realm remember why it yet breathed. By the time they reached Winterfell, the snows had thickened to belly-deep drifts. Great kite ravens soared above, circling the returning host until their croaks echoed through empty battlements. The castle gate swung inward with a groan that sounded almost human, and Catelyn Stark hurried forward, furs flaring, cheeks flushed from the cold and something fiercer. Her eye stopped upon the sledge. The color bled from her lips. Jon thought she might curse or collapse, but instead she bowed her head, touching a gloved hand to her heart. "He came north when so many would not," she murmured, each word small and precise as stitches in mourning cloth. "For that I shall weep, though his death renews old pain." Bran ordered the crypts opened, torches set in iron hoops to chase back ancestral gloom. They laid Robert beside Ned. Stone and flesh, separated by years of regret, now ended in ice. The carved direwolf above Ned's likeness seemed to watch as Jon drew the warhammer from his shoulder and rested it across Robert's armored chest. The obsidian edges glimmered in torchlight, then guttered into shadow. That night Winterfell's great hall overflowed with survivors, wildlings standing shoulder to shoulder with Knights of the Vale, men of the Watch drinking broth beside Tyroshi Sellswords, who had answered late but fought well. No bards played. Instead, Bran raised a hand for silence, and into that hush, a red priestess stepped forward. She had arrived with Stannis returning fleet, hair like river fire, eyes bright as embers nestled under dark lashes. Flames danced across her palms as she spoke, the words Rhoynar and Valyrian twined like silk. She told of kings who forged dawns and paid dawn's price, of shadows that linger in cracks of the world seeking hearts to quicken. When she finished, the hall breathed again, and every man, even the hardened umbers, looked smaller for having glimpsed the yawning gulf between mortal fires and the night beyond. Later, Jon stood upon the battlements with Bran, watching auroras shimmer like silent pennants over the snowfields. The boy's thin voice carried easily in the still air. "The Night King was but a branch of the root," he said, pupils reflecting green lights. "I felt the cold retreat, not die. Far north, something stirs where ice is older than names. It gathers broken songs, shaping them into new verses." Jon breathed frost and memory. "Then we ride again." "Not with swords alone," Bran replied. "Ice must meet fire." The wall shivers, It knows its mirror's still alive. Winter is patient. A week later, ravens thundered across the sky. Streaks of black ink against pearl. They carried two messages that would fracture the realm anew. The first reached Winterfell in the Red Dawn. King Renly Baratheon had claimed his brother's mantle upon the Iron Throne, crowned in the Great Sept with silvered antlers forged overnight by master smiths. Lords Tyrell, Rowan, and Selmy bent knee before crowds cheering for a young king who smelled less of steel and more of spring. The second raven bore words from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon contested the crown, naming Renly usurper and pledging to scour false claimants with Lightbringer once it blazed in his grasp. News struck Winterfell like axes against ice. Jaime Lannister, lingering to escort his surviving Kingsguard south, chuckled at the irony. Barely has the king's pyre cooled, and already two new songs of glory vie to drown his echo. The laugh died quickly when Jon's stare met his. "Forgive me," Jaime offered, shoulders slumping. Old habits. That evening Jon convened a council in the repaired Solar. Bran, Catelyn, Lord Commander Denys Mallister, Tormund Giantspan, Maester Luwin, Jorah Mormont, the Red Priestess Melanira, and even Tyrion Lannister arrived traveling incognito from King's Landing. Took places around a carved elm table crowded by candles whose flames guttered in unseen draught. Maps of the true north sprawled beneath cups of spiced ale. Inkstains showed where strategists had pricked possibilities. Jon gestured to the largest sheet. Its vellum crackled at corners. "Here," he said, tapping a blank white expanse beyond the frost fangs. Bran's ravens traced fever glows under the ice, pulsing like hearts. If any power remains, it shelters there. Tormund scratched his beard, great braids swaying. Hardhome lies near enough that even dead men cling to her ruins. A march across that waste will bleed you before first spear is cast. "Then we do not march," countered Tyrion, voice low and savvy. "We sail. Eastwatch's docks barely survived last moon's storm, but rebuild them with Stormland's timber, and you can skirt the frozen shore. Fewer miles, fewer lost toes." Melanira's lips curve faintly. Flame dreams whisper that a dragon's fire might still answer faithful hearts. Across the narrow sea, three heads rise. The girl who commands them feels the cold draw upon her soul as wind curls under a door. Her gaze slid to Jon. "Summon her." The Fireborn and the Ice-Marked must meet, else the Cradle of Dawn remains empty. Jorah stiffened. "Daenerys Stormborn," he breathed. Half question, half prayer. Catelyn raised a brow but did not protest. Too many unthinkable unions had already saved lives. They debated long into night, Bran mostly silent until Tyrion, frustrated, asked what the boy truly saw. Bran shrugged thin shoulders. "I see cracks in a wheel built on swords. If we argue whose crown gleams brightest, the ice will swallow our quarreling tongues. If we bind crowns into a single ring, fire can roll the wheel north." Then so. The next morning ravens leapt skyward bearing sealed parchments. One to Renly proposing detent and aid against the true enemy. One to Stannis offering dragonglass in exchange for ships, and one carried by a gull-throated raven bound across the narrow sea with words in High Valyrian addressed to Daenerys Targaryen. Jon sealed each with wax pressed by the direwolf sigil flanked by the Baratheon stag, joined as if grown from one trunk. Winter's reprieve lasted only 6 days. Scouts returned from the shivering forest north of the wall with eyes wide from sleepless terror. They spoke of a woman carved of moonlit frost, antlers of ice curling over silver hair that fluttered though no wind blew. She gathered broken spears, shards of the Night King's armor, and walked among corpses, whispering them to rise. Some obeyed, but not all. Most shattered, rejecting resurrection as though the king's fall had freed them beyond command. Yet she persisted, and each night her followers grew. Jon listened, jaw clenched so tight lines etched down his cheeks. Melanira read flames in a copper bowl, saw the woman melt into frost whirls, reform and kneel before an altar of black ice, where a heart, luminous and slow, beat toward wakefulness. She called the woman the Frost Mother, a progenitor forgotten by men, consort to the Night King in ages lost. When his crown fell, Her womb quickened. Melanira whispered. She bears him anew, readying to birth cold dawn. Supplies arrived from the south at last. Stannis' ships, hulls trimmed with dragon-glass ram spikes, captained by men who bowed stiffly to Jon but obeyed. With them came Samwell Tarly, cheeks wind-ruddy, arms overflowing with scrolls bound in oilskin. Old Town opened vaults sealed since the long night, he said, breathless. There are rites. Seals of light hammered into ice, needing dragonfire to awaken. He unfurled a cracked vellum sheet, showing concentric runes around a flaming sun. Azor Ahai is named, but so is a gay thane of quiet Snowham. Two must strike together at the altar, else the door never closes. Jon drew a breath that tasted of frost and old fear. Then we court fire and snow both. Plans crystallized. A fleet sailing beyond Eastwatch, rangers clearing shore points, watchtowers manned with horn and flame. Messages to Renly seeking grain and steel. A tentative pact with wildlings to guide southern armies through glacier canyons. Even Jaime, preparing to ride south, paused long enough to volunteer a vanguard of knights of the Reach he swore would follow his sword, if not his family's purse. Honor's cheap when coins freeze, he quipped, shrugging elegant shoulders. Southward, King Renly paced the floor of the council chamber beneath rafters, hung with rose garlands and golden stags. The letter from Winterfell lay open, Jon's neat script stern and urgent. Margaery Tyrell watched her husband's restless strides, hands tucked into emerald sleeves. He offers you purpose, she said gently. A king's blood buys little if the kingdom freeze shatters. Renly paused, gazing at the painted table shipped from Dragonstone for his planning. Stannis will read the same. He will think I bend knee to fear. He touched the letter again, fingertips tracing the wolf and stag seal. I won't be remembered as the king who feasted while winter devoured babes. We will send the grain, the steel, 3,000 fresh lances. And I will ride north come spring. Across the chamber, Varys smiled thinly. Mercy may yet forge stronger chains than pride, your grace. At sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood upon the prow of the Silverwing, wind whipping silver hair into laughter against her cheeks. Drogon circled above, wings casting eclipses upon restless waves, twin sisters trailing him like shadows aflame. Jorah Mormont's raven perched on her wrist. The message in its tube had smelled of pine and cold and desperate resolve. She read Joan's words a third time. Fire meets ice. Together, forge dawn. Ay. When she lowered the parchment, her violet eyes burned with new purpose. Set course for Eastwatch, she commanded her captain. Winter calls my children home. The sea darkened to mirror the sky. Storm fronts gathered like serried cavalry. At night, green-blue curtains of light flickered just above the horizon, hinting at thresholds unraveling between mortal and myth. Sailors prayed to motherly gods. Some prayed to darker ones, begging to be hidden from whatever stalked that cold beyond. In King's Landing, beneath the gilded spires of the Great Sept, the faith militant reported strange chills in the crypts. Corpses kept for noble display found rimed with frost. Roses lain upon tombs wilted to black husks overnight. High Septon Eustace deemed it miracle or curse. Uncertain. Whispers reached Renly's ears, and in quiet worry he ordered his best masons to carve stone hearths in every cellar arch. He dreamed thrice of Robert roaring with laughter that ended in coughs of ice. Meanwhile, in the bowels of abandoned Harrenhal, Stannis met Melisandre by candlelight, where walls wept perpetual damp. The Red Woman's eyes bled crimson reflection as she held a shard of ice armor, spiraling patterns faintly pulsing. We forge Lightbringer, but its glow must be tempered against the chill of this. She pressed the shard into a brazier. It steamed, refused to melt. Stannis' jaw tightened. Outside, storm clouds hammered the ramparts with sleet that rang like distant steel. Back in Winterfell, Sam uncovered a brittle codex describing the Frostmother, not merely as queen, but as seedbed for cyclical night. Every long era, she rose to quicken a new king of death. The cycle could be severed if her heart, carved of the blood ice beneath the glacier, were shattered in the instant of her labor. But only blades welded of living flame and cooled in hero's blood could pierce that heart. Jon listened, features set like carved basalt. Hero's blood, he echoed. The words tasted of salt and ghosts. Nights grew harsher. Graves of whites burned at Castle Black, hissed long into midnight, releasing sulphurous smoke that drifted south and kept wolves howling. North of the wall, patrols glimpsed blue lanterns bobbing far among drifts. Soulless beacons. Rangers sent to follow them vanished. Whenever Melanira gazed into her copper bowl, flames blew sideways, as though wind howled from the very north. On the 9th morning after Sam's revelation, Bran summoned Jon to the Godswood. Snow blanketed the ancient weirwood like bridal lace, yet its leaves remained blood-red even in deepest frost. Bran's wheelchair sat before the carved face. His thin hands rested on the arms as if upon command handles of some vast unseen engine. Behind him, ravens perched, silent, black silhouettes absorbing the hush. "I have seen the Frost Mother," Bran said, voice far away. "She travels through tunnels under the ice, toward a chamber older than stars where rivers of frozen fire converge. There she will birth the heart anew. When it beats, she will shatter, and from her shards 10,000 kings will rise to govern every corpse in Westeros. We have until the next full moon's 3rd night, when the northern sky bleeds red. Then thou, I say, then thou." Jon knelt beside him, breath pluming. "Then we sail tomorrow. Daenerys comes. Her dragons carry fire older than this world. Lightbringer or no, living flame and dragon glass together may break the cycle." Bran's gaze settled on Jon's face. Sam's scrolls speak of heroes' blood. "You are both ice and fire, Eddard son of the North, Rhaegar's seed of dragon heat. Yours may be the blood." When Jon flinched, Bran reached for his hand. "You will not die, brother, but you may be changed. All things forged by extremes become new." That night, Jon wandered Winterfell's courtyards under pale lanterns. Snow muffled footfalls. Only the crackling braziers spoke. He found Arya's needlework hall, long abandoned, and stepped inside. Dust danced in torch glow. A broken stick of chalk lay near a faded bullseye on the far wall, where younger siblings had practiced archery. He touched the chalk, remembered laughter, remembered Ygritte's hair bright against cave fires. His reflection in a frost-dusted window showed gray speckling his beard. 32 years old, and yet he felt carved by centuries. At the wall, Gilly tucked little Sam into furs, while Ghost prowled the ramparts, red eyes slashing the dark. Giantsbane sang bawdy ballads to restless free folk until their tremors eased. Beneath Eastwatch's half-rebuilt pier, carpenters nailed final planks, unaware of frigid silhouettes watching from beyond tide reach. When torches shone, the shapes receded, leaving prints that sizzled and vanished. In the ghost city of Hardhome, the Frost Mother appeared beneath a vaulted sky of shifting lights. She stood upon a dais of staggered ice, arms spread like pale branches. Before her, a mound of splintered bones and broken weapons began to quake, pieces stitching into macabre anatomy. Where the Night King's brow once crowned icy temples, new antlers sprouted, sharper, branching twice as wide. Glacial breath steamed from a formless mouth. The Frost Mother's voice when she sang was not sound, but a ripple of bitter temperature that cracked old stone to powder. Across the shivering sea, Daenerys' fleet carved white wakes through swells that smelled of iron and silt. She spent hours upon deck, reading Jon's letter until the ink smeared with salt spray. Tyrion, who had slipped from Winterfell under pretext of carrying replies but truly to guide the queen, stood at her side, hair whipping silver gold. "He writes plainly," she said once. "No courtly flattery, no titles, only the needs of flesh and flame." Tyrion nodded. "Jon Snow never learned to gild dread. He tells the shape of things as they are. That honesty is weapon and weakness both." Daenerys smiled faintly. "Then perhaps my dragons will teach the world to fear ugly truths delivered in fire." Near dusk on the second week of the voyage, Scout ships sighted an iceberg chain where no chart marked one. The floating towers gleamed translucent, shot through by veins of night blue. As the fleet shifted course, a resonant groan keened across the water. The berg sheared, calving shards that rose like spears. Sailors cried out when shapes, thin alabaster, humanoid, crawled upon those shards, leaping from peak to peak in impossible strides. Drogon plunged from above, unleashing crimson conflagration. Flame enveloped two shapes. Ice popped, steam geysered, and when vapor cleared, scorched fragments sank. No wails, no blood, only silence. Daenerys' face hardened. "They scout the sea as well," she murmured. "The war widens." On mainland Westeros, Renly mustered an escort of 1,000 armored rose lancers selected from the Reach's fiercest. Loras Tyrell rode at his right, banners streaming bright green and gold. As they crossed the Blackwater stench, small folk watched from rooftops, candles flickering like myriad stars. Some cheered, but many stared hollow-eyed. Rumors of chill specters wandering flea bottom at night had seeded new fear. In the dragon pit's ruins, beggars whispered that they had heard scales rustle on stones and seen blue glowing reptiles slither beneath burnt arches. The faith blamed heresy, alchemists blamed alarum, Varys blamed the creeping echo of the Frostmother's reach. None dared investigate after sunset. 2 days north of King's Landing, Renly's column encountered Stannis' smaller vanguard, under black banners emblazoned with a fiery heart pierced by stag. The brothers parleyed at dusk on a snow-dusted ridge. Breath fogged between them. Renly spoke first. "Shall we debate again whose claim shines truer? Or march as one crownless host under a storm-cloud sky?" Stannis' jaw flexed. "When night devours fire, crowns will matter no more. I will stand in that darkness with Lightbringer, even if its forge is my own flesh. Walk beside me, or fall behind." "Many," Renly sighed, glancing toward Margaery, who waited watchful a dozen paces away. "You ever loved duty more than those who breathe? Yet here stands a duty so vast we cannot glimpse it from one side alone." He pulled Jon's letter from his cloak. "The North calls," I answered. A rare softness touched Stannis' eyes, quickly caged. He offered a curt nod. Then the storm rides together. In the distance, thunder rolled where no clouds massed. Both brothers looked skyward uneasily. As their combined host turned north, a courier falcon reached Stannis. Melisandre's missive delivered from Harrenhal. Lightbringer's final forging awaited dragonfire and hero's blood. Stannis read it twice, then burned it in a brass lantern. The next morning, he commanded riders to find Jon Snow on the wall and request audience beneath open sky, where shadows cannot hide him. Renly made no objection. Secrets now cut men deeper than swords, and winter sharpened every secret. At Eastwatch by the sea, the first of Daenerys' ships sighted the watchtower lanterns flicking in violet dawn. Jon, cloaked in gray-trimmed black, stood on the jetty flanked by Ghost, whose white fur billowed as if alive with storm. The dragons wheeled overhead, screeches echoing off frozen surf. When Daenerys stepped ashore, Drogon swooped low, furnace breath raking water into hissing vapor. Jon did not flinch. Their eyes met. Hers violet fire, his northern steel veined with worry. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to two souls burdened by impossible lineage. Then Jon bowed. "Thank you for answering. I go where the world breaks," she replied quietly. "It breaks most loudly here." That evening the council reconvened aboard the flagship, renamed Idon Forge for Omen's sake. Bran spoke through a carved weirwood mask brought onto deck. Eyes rolled white as he warged from Winterfell's godswood across ravens perched on the rigging. Sam placed scrolls before Daenerys. Melanira and Missandei translated tongues old when mountains were young. Tyrion plotted courses up fjords iced to razor channels. Dragons roosted on masts, their heat melting hoarfrost which refroze moments later in spiderweb tendrils of glass. Plans resolved. A strike force would sail north-northwest along the coast, to land at a stretch of beach brand called Glassgrave Bay. There a glacier tunnel widened enough for dragons' wings. Jon, Daenerys, Melanira, Sam, Tormund, and a cohort of seasoned men would advance through the tunnels to the Heart Chamber. Lightbringer, if forged, would be wielded by Jon beside Daenerys' fire. Dragonglass arrows and wildfire vials would guard the breach, while Renly and Stannis' combined armies marched overland to hold the Frostfang's southern passes, delaying any risen host spilling south should the strike fail. Jaime's Reach Knights guarded supply lines. The Watch garrisoned the wall's remaining castles to repel flanking maneuvers. Before dawn, Sam and Melanira prepared the ritual forge. Drogon hovered, wings fanning sparks from braziers built of bronze rune panels. Stannis strode forward, a blade barely glowing in his grasp. He slashed his palm, blood hissing as it touched steel. The runes flared ember bright. Then Jon approached, silent, heart hammering. He drew Longclaw across his own forearm, crimson beading in freezing air. When his blood struck the blade, fire burst along its length, interlacing crimson and gold. Drogon's roar answered, blasting white-hot flame that engulfed steel and men alike. When glare subsided, Stannis still stood, eyes alight with wonder. But it was Jon who raised the sword, now flaming as sunrise itself, the hilt incandescent beyond heat of forge. Lightbringer, Bran's ravens shrieked. The Frostmother moves, the heart quickens. His voice, filtered through raven throats, scraped raw wall. Jon sheathed the living blade into an obsidian scabbard, slung across his back, opposite Robert's warhammer. Two burdens forged for opposite ends of night. Daenerys approached, laying a hand on his wrist. Heat and cold warred under flesh. Sparks leapt where her dragon-calloused palm met his skin. Without speaking, they understood the pact old as planets. Ice and fire, crossing to midwinter's womb. The strike force embarked under skies swirled by ghostly auroras. Dragons pulled currents of scarlet into ribbons that spiraled behind their silhouettes. Wolves howled along the wall. South of Winterfell, new buds pushed through snow, as though the land itself held its breath for the outcome. Inside glass-gray base caves, icy stalactites dripped in the warmth of torches, ticking like clocks made of frozen tears. Each footstep echoed forever. Deeper they delved, guided by Bran's ravens flitting from outcrop to outcrop. The ice turned blue, then black, shot through with luminous veins pulsing faintly. Sam's breath came in ragged clouds. "We walk inside sky-fallen glass," he whispered. None replied. Hours passed. The tunnel opened into a cathedral vast cavern, where pillars of frozen fire spiraled hundreds of feet to a ceiling lost in void. At its center towered a colossal cocoon of translucent ice, heart-red glow throbbing within. Before it knelt the Frostmother, her long hair swirling as though underwater. She rose, gaze ancient and fathomless. Antlers of frost branched from her temples. Behind her, half-formed shapes stirred inside the cocoon, limbs pressuring walls like children kicking womb. The Frostmother spoke without voice, the air itself resonating. They thought ending the king ended winter's song. But every note echoes. I merely gather them into chorus. Jon unsheathed Lightbringer. Flame bathed the cavern in daylight. Daenerys stepped forward, Drogon's growl trembling the earth overhead. Your song ends where dawn begins, she declared, words echoing like sword beats. Ice crystallized in jagged spears, launching at the group. Tormund swung dragonglass axes, shattering shafts into glitter. Sam hurled wildfire pots. Green flames consumed shards midair, casting demon shadows. Melanira chanted, red ribbons coiling from her palms, fusing into shields of heat that flashed steam. Jon advanced. Each step left boot prints smoking. The Frostmother glided to meet him, frost trailing like comet tails. She lifted slender hands. Claws of ice erupted from her fingertips. They clashed, Lightbringer's molten arc against crystal talons. Sparks brilliant as stars exploded. The Frostmother's claws shattered but regrew instantly. She struck again, again. each blow ringing cosmic timbre. Daenerys circled, summoning Drogon through a breach overhead. The great dragon descended, expelling white-hot inferno. The Frostmother shrieked. Glass shards flayed from her skin. Yet she pivoted, ice-knitting wounds, and speared Drogon's shoulder with frozen javelins that sprayed blue fire. Drogon roared, but flame dimmed. The javelins sucked heat, drinking dragonfire into itself. Melanira screamed an incantation, and the javelin shattered. Drogon's wound bled ember-bright blood. Sizzling, Daenerys climbed a pile of broken ice, hair whipping wildly. "Dracarys," she cried. All three dragons streamed inferno, torrents crossing in midair to form a crucible of light that hammered at the cocoon. Ice evaporated into blinding steam. Inside, embryonic figures writhed, half-finished, crying in voices like cracking glaciers. The Frostmother howled, lashing Jon with storms of spears. He parried, arms numbed. Each block chipped the sword's quillons until flame flowed to mend them. He glimpsed her eyes, void of pupil, swirling fractals of snowstorm memory. Kiai was here before fire. Her gaze seemed to say, "Damned I will be after ash." Jon drove the warhammer into the cavern floor. Shockwaves split ice, fissures racing toward the cocoon. Walls groaned. Spires toppled. Bran, far away yet inside every raven, whispered guidance. The heart glows now. His voice rumbled through Jon's skull. Strike the core when it pulses crimson thrice. Sweat froze on Jon's brow. He dodged another hail. Sprinted, leaping broken ridges. The cocoon's glow pulsed bright. Brighter, brightest, then dimmed. 1. Tut. A beat later again. 2. The Frostmother sensed, lunged, conjuring a blizzard so dense the cavern vanished in whiteness. Jon closed his eyes, listening for the heartbeat. In blindness he felt it, low, reverberant. Dremno. He plunged Lightbringer into the cocoon. Fire screamed, ice howled, and a choir of unborn wraiths shrieked as blade met heart. A crimson shockwave rippled outward, vaporizing whiteness. The Frostmother staggered, hands clutching at nothing as shards spider-webbed across her porcelain flesh. She reached for Jon, but he twisted the blade. The heart shattered into incandescent splinters. Frostmother's mouth opened in silent lament. She dissolved into flurries that melted before they touched ground. Lightbringer went dark, steam rising from every rune. Jon stumbled, knees buckling. Daenerys caught him. Drogon landed behind, wings folding. Around them, ice pillars cracked. Cavern ceilings shedding chunks that crashed into abyssal pits. "We must go," Tyrion shouted from the tunnel mouth. Men hauled Sam, Tormund, and wounded rangers back toward narrow passages. They sprinted as the cathedral collapsed, fleeing down corridors now dripping torrents of meltwater. At Glassgrave Bay, the ice cliffs calved violently, tidal waves slamming ships against shore. Yet, as dawn dawned, survivors watched the horizon lighten to rose gold. The auroras faded. The air lost its cutting edge. Snowflakes fell softer, seamed with glimmers of rainbow. Jon stood on a promontory, arm linked with Daenerys. Lightbringer's blade had cooled to amber, runes sleeping. He touched the scar on his forearm, no longer bleeding, yet throbbing with dull heat. Bran's ravens circled overhead. Through them Bran spoke. The wheel cracks. Spring breathes. Menderwend. South. Renly and Stannis, camped in frozen passes, felt sudden warmth spill through air, heard distant thunder like glaciers sighing in relief. Soldiers raised puzzled faces. Some wept, some laughed, some simply sank to knees, uncomprehending. In King's Landing, ice roses in crypts melted to petals of pale water. The faith militant found no chill left in tomb corridors. Varys exhaled long, fingers trembling. Yet beneath Harrenhal's cursed towers, a single shard of night king's armor, forgotten in a brass lantern, glowed faint blue. Melisandre stared at it, flame dancing in her eyes. Every darkness leaves seeds. She murmured to the emptiness. We must guard the soil. On the shivering sea, bergs cracked and sank, leaving calm water that steamed in new sunlight. Daenerys' fleet hoisted sails soon warmed by southerly breeze. Dragons basked upon mainmasts, tails curling lazily. Jon penned letters to Renly and Stannis. Each winter broken. Return south. Bring seeds, not swords. And now, at Winterfell, the weirwood leaves lost their frost crusts and dripped ruby tears onto new grass tips that dared the air. Catelyn walked the courtyard with Sansa, both marveling how his breath no longer rose in little clouds. Arya, returned at last from Braavos, tossed a coin into a melted puddle and grinned when ripples spread further than expected. Yet peace felt fragile. Jon convened council after council, planning watchtowers well beyond the wall, forging alliances with wildlings to patrol the lands of always winter. He sent Sam back south to found a new order of maesters dedicated to recording and fighting supernatural threats. Tyrion rode for King's Landing to counsel Renly on healing a realm riven by fear. Stannis, his fire sword quenched but pride intact, accepted governance of newly freed Gaston Grey convicts to rebuild ports destroyed by storms. One misty dawn, Jon stood alone atop the wall, ghost pressed against his thigh. The horizon glimmered pastel where once it brooded iron. He thought of Robert's roaring laugh, of Ned's quiet loyalty, of Ygritte's question if he truly knew anything. Far below, workers hammered at new gates. Ice and wood and bronze married into structures, both ancient and strange. Dragons swept overhead, shadows yet protective, not ominous. Daenerys joined him silently. Together, they watched sunrise. Do you hear it? She asked at last. Jon tilted his head. Beyond wind, beyond creak of ice, there lay a hush, empty of threat, yet laden with waiting possibility. Yes, he said, a quiet, like the world holding breath. She touched his hand. Let us teach it to sing. They descended the stairs side by side, leaving their silhouettes fading against dawning gold. Two figures forged by night, walking toward a song unwritten, toward a spring unsure yet promised, bearing scars that glowed faintly whenever sun struck them just so. Reminders that salvation's price is never paid in full, only ever on account. For stories do not end like seasons. They turn, always asking who... K. PGSQL. South of the thawing wall, the world exhaled. Vapors once sharp with ice now smelled faintly of moss and damp earth, the first shy promise of spring. Yet the quiet that Jon and Daenerys sensed atop those ancient stones held as many perils as the storm they had broken. In the gap between crises, men returned to themselves, and men, by nature, remembered grievances more readily than gratitude. 3 days after sunrise warmed the southern ramparts. Ravens carried tidings that small folk already whispered. Roads dictated by frost-bitten winds and starving wolves were open again, and with them came bandits who wore scraps of broken white walker mail as grisly trophies. They raided caravans trekking dormice and last winter apples north to feed the watch. Some raiders styled themselves the Sons of the Last Night, dispossessed wildlings convinced they were heirs to an age now ended. Others were deserters from southern armies, eager to wield terror like a sword of their own. Sansa Stark confronted the first report in Winterfell's solar, braziers flickering across maps, still rimed with hoarfrost. Her jaw set in the same iron lines once etched on her father's face. Leave them unchecked, she told Jon's steward, and they'll yank the roots of new shoots before we taste one harvest. Send letters to Lady Mormont on Bear Island, Lord Glover at Deepwood Motte. They know northern woods like they know their blood. But as each weight settled on local shoulders, heavier questions turned south. Rented swords returned to the Reach, and crownlands with pockets empty, save for dread. And dread, once starved of its object, often sought new feasts. In taverns from Hayford to Horn Hill, words like a ye dragon queen an egg a northern bastard king, seethed among cups of second-press wine. Some hailed them saviors. More wondered if any savior who answered to no iron throne would heed farmers when gold cloaks knelt to roses or fiery hearts. Tyrion Lannister felt that gust of suspicion long before it reached the Red Keep. He rode south with a modest company of Vale Knights and 3 of the Reach's most loquacious septons. Diplomatic ballast, he called them. Along the King's Road, he distributed handbill copies of Maester Samwell's treatise on the Frostmother's Fall, plain-spoken accounts of Jon Snow's blood sacrifice, and the dragon's cleansing fire. The more the people know, the less rumor gnaws, Tyrion remarked, flicking his reins as dawn stained sky above him gold. Yet even he could not post scrolls faster than tongues could wag. By the time his party reached the banks of the Blackwater, King's Landing had donned spring's finery. Fruit sellers hawked apricot wedges sticky with early syrup. Fishermen angled silver dace glimmering under tranquil tides. But certain alleys, ones Varys little birds once patrolled, smelled of charred wax and cold tallow, the signs of clandestine vigils. Tyrion recognized the token, a cracked cobblestone daubed with melted candle stubs. The faith militant's clandestine symbol, that the city's devout had begun night watch prayers for purity of flame. They might thank dragons for burning winter now, but in a month they would wonder if dragonfire would next cleanse sinful streets. He entered the red-tiled solar of Maegor's Holdfast, just as Renly dismissed a cluster of black-robed septons. The king's hair, grown longer in concession to Tyrell fashion, gleamed chestnut under latticed sunlight. Tyrion bowed, noticing hollows beneath Renly's eyes. Each line of courtly ease looked as if braced upon a scaffold of exhaustion. "You look as if you've slept with your crown on, your grace," Tyrion quipped. Renly attempted a laugh and half succeeded. "Have you tried balancing alliances as a pillow?" He gestured to a table strewn with ledgers. "The city demands bread. The Tyrells demand roses. The faith demands penitence, and Stannis demands I burn. Yet the dragons and direwolves, at least, demand nothing but room to breathe. Perhaps I'll appoint one as master of coin." "Now." Tyrion poured 2 cups of Dornish white. Coin's easier to mint than trust. He unfolded the treaty Jon Snow had drafted. The Compact of Dawn, outlining grain tributes and garrison rotations, most controversial, terms for a great moot of lords, to amend the realm's statutes before winter's scars scabbed into something uglier. Jon offers mutual protection through confederation, not vassalage. A union of crowns, not one crown ruling all. Renly traced a finger over the sigils at the bottom. A direwolf entwined with a stag. An iron throne replaced by a rising sun. They never tried in Westeros, he mused. My lords love precedent. Precedent is merely an ancestor who lived long enough to write memoirs, Tyrion said. You can birth new ones. Renly exhaled through his nose. Stannis will see it as abdication. Stannis now wields only what loyalty clings to his iron sense of justice, Tyrion countered. If a moot crowns new laws in sight of gods and banners, he must choose the realm over self to keep face. Unless he fancies another civil war while the north still smolders. Renly rolled the parchment, eyes distant. If I step forward, will the north send its white wolf with me? Or will they watch my back for knife shadows? Tyrion smirked. The north watches everyone. But they remember who marched and who dithered. Deeds, not oaths, earn their hearths. Renly's shoulders lowered by half an inch. I will ride, he decided. But the moot must convene before the harvest, else absent lords will claim fields too precious to forsake. Send ravens. Begin tomorrow. Outside the solar, Loras Tyrell waited, eyes alight with quiet pride. Tyrion gave him a subtle nod. The knight inclined his head, a rose acknowledging the dwarf who trimmed stray thorns. Ow. In the chill midlands between the Neck and Baratheon, Stannis Baratheon inspected rows of tents stitched from green and black canvas. Thousands of men shifted restlessly. Some sharpened spears. Others debated the gospels of airy lore with brusque Myrish mercenaries who sneered any god that didn't pay. Melisandre stood at Stannis' elbow, her red silk stark amid drab wool. She sensed the wind's new warmth like a distant furnace and frowned. The fire dimmed, yet not quenched. You quenched your sword too early. Stannis flexed gloved fingers around the hilt of a washed-out blade. Lightbringer's glow lost when the Frostmother fell. Flame served its purpose, he replied. Now, the realm must. A courier from the south arrived in dust-caked mail, bearing Renly's seal and Tyrion's swift script. Go Great Moot at Bitterbridge, first day of barley harvest. En? Stannis raid, jaw tightening. Bitterbridge, he scoffed. So Tyrells can parade their blooms. Melisandre touched the letter. Her fingertips blackened the seal's wax as if reading heat. A moot may forge one crown of many. You may strike the final blow by tempering iron with humility, or you may remain iron and rust alone. Stannis scowled, but snapped orders to his captains. Break camp at dawn. March for Bitterbridge. Menawa. Now. As Southron kings sorted pride, the dragons reveled in heights unfettered by spear or storm. Rhaegal and Viserion soared low, over shivering seas calm, rousing schools of herring that formed shining glyphs beneath waves. Atop Drogon, Daenerys skimmed a coastline, few charts named. Jagged promontories jutted like black teeth. She steered toward a sheltered cove where gray stones bore fossilized spirals, evidence that even these brutal shores once knew warmth and life. Jon rode behind her in the saddle harness, gloved hands resting lightly on her hips. Neither spoke during descent. Both listened to wind roar through Drogon's membranes. When talons kissed rock, the two dismounted onto a plateau of lichen-scrawled basalt. From here, they could see north to an unbroken sheet of white, south to shimmering blue, and between them what looked like a black wound across the land, a fissure newly opened, steam wreathing its edges. Magma glimmered red below. Bran said the earth shakes when ice hearts die, Jon murmured. Daenerys stepped to the fissure's lip, heat buffeting her cheeks. Perhaps the world's blood used to freeze in its veins, she said, and now it flows again. Drogon prowled behind them, sniffing the vent. A puff of smoke churned from his nostrils. Jon laid a hand on the dragon's neck scales, feeling vibrations like distant thunder. Do you miss the east? He asked Daenerys. The warmth without tremor? She smiled away, bitter edge. The east was never warmth, she said. Only fire that burned the wrong wood. Here, she inhaled salt and volcanic fumes. Here the fire burns for a reason. They camped on that plateau as dusk bled magenta. Ghosts slithed gull nests for fish, while Drogon curled in basalt bowls, wings half unfurled to catch lingering heat. Jon and Daenerys sat by a small cook fire, dauntingly mundane compared to the forge of their dragons or hearts. He traced the fresh scar on his forearm, the one Lightbringer's forging left luminous under certain moonlights. She watched his fingers. Each scar carries two stories. She mused. How it came, and why it stays. He met her eyes. This one stays so we remember the price of living. He exhaled. What scar stays for you? She considered. The day I stepped from flames with dragons, she answered softly. The world expected a breaker of chains. Now it expects a weaver of them. That burn inside my bones reminds me not to yank too hard on new threads, lest they tear. Wolves howled in the far dark. Jon added driftwood to their flame. A moot, he said. They'll want us to present a united stewardship. They'll debate lineage, heritage, legitimacy. Legitimacy, Daenerys echoed, tasting the word like sour fruit. Doesn't matter to the dead we buried, but it matters to those who stayed alive. He drew shapes in dirt. If they fear dragons, they'll fear you. If they resent Northerners, they'll resent me. Yet if we stand apart, they'll choose sides and feed resentment. Her gaze did not waver. Do you propose we wed them together? Silence pulsed between them, lit by ember glow. Jon swallowed. I propose we wed realms, queenship, kingship, something neither north nor south can claim alone. She raised a brow. Marriage, then, she translated, voice light, but eyes searching. Joan's cheeks colored under soot. If you would have it. Not for convenience. For promise. Then tell. Daenerys looked toward Drogon, who twitched in dream. A bed mixed of ice and fire might crack the frame. She teased, then softened. But I have wed worse cause. She extended her hand across flames. He clasped it. The winds sighed as if pages turned to a new chapter. Nah. At Winterfell, Bran dispatched ravens stitched with sigils old as the first men, inviting free folk elders to the Great Moot. Tormund Giantsbane volunteered to escort them south. Before departing, Tormund visited the crypt of Eddard Stark. He stood quiet, massive hands worrying a bearskin cap. Never met you, Stark, he muttered to stone carvings. But your boy's got a heart like a giant's cudgel, and a mind sharper than Mance Rayder's spear. Thought you should know. Above ground, Maester Luwin directed scribes to copy Sam's treatise for every holdfast library, the Candlelight Edict. He coined it. Knowledge like this cannot dim again, he told apprentices as they ground inks of squid and alder bark. When asked how to finance so many copies, he chuckled. Sell the melted crown of winter. That's what we've won. Time to think. Bemds. Arya sparred daily with the first northern recruits of a new order Jon called the Dawn Guard, an elite force meant to guard wild valleys, not castle halls. She tested each warrior with blunted needles thrown in unexpected flicks, striking wrists and ankles. A sword you see too late is an enemy's grin, she said. Learn to feel wind before steel. In Bravos, whispers of Westeros thaw reached the house of black and white. A waif in half-mask asked the kindly man if they should resume lists of names. He sighed, flicking dust from a tome. When tides shift, some islands vanish, others rise. Let coins speak where knives once did. Yet he penned a letter to Arya, delivered through couriers bound for Bitterbridge, containing only the Braavosi proverb. When storms pass, count not the wreckage, but the sailors. And now, Enderal, Bitterbridge weeks later, resembled a city birthed from gossamer. Marquee tents sprouted across river glades, multicolored banners flapping above stately pavilions. The Tyrells oversaw floral garlands strung between oaks, while Stormland's quartermasters hammered plank walkways to keep high-borne boots above mud. At the moot center rose a wooden amphitheater circled by 7 cedar pillars carved with symbols of each kingdom, plus a fresh 8th. The night lantern, depicting an unbroken ring of torch flames encircling a dire wolf howling at a rising sun. Lords arrived by the hundreds. Martells cloaked in sun-orange silk beside Arryn knights wrapped in sky blue. Greyjoy captains bearing netted axes. City representatives from Lannisport and Gulltown. Even Dorne's Prince Quentyn came with retinue riding sandsteeds, cheeks still peeling from winter's chill. At dusk preceding the moot, the great field glowed with cookfires and 1,000 conversations, a hive of possibility. Tyrion scurried between factions with flagons of arbor gold, greasing axles. In one tent, he convinced Lord Tarley not to demand dragonglass tribute from Dragonstone. In another, he cajoled Lady Dustin into supporting the Dawn Guard appropriation by promising trade deals for umbers, felled pine. Each success he toasted, though he sipped rarely. A clear head might wobble, but never topple. Jon and Daenerys arrived on the first morning, preceded by the shadow of 3 dragons that darkened the moat waters and sent fisher eels diving for silk. Jon wore stark gray trimmed in Baratheon gold, a cloak stitched by Sansa combining direwolf at shoulder and crowned stag at clasp. Daenerys chose supple white leather embroidered with red runes of ancient Valyria, set among direwolf fur collar. They dismounted so quietly that many attendees realized only after hush rolled across grounds like a rippling cloth. On the dais, Renly straightened, eyes flicking between them and Stannis, who had taken position opposite, burnt cape fluttering. The amphitheater filled, lords upon tiered benches, small folk invited to ring outside railings. The High Septon led a brief prayer, though when he thanked R'hllor for flame, half the benches stirred discomfort. He then ceded dais to Renly. Subjects of Westeros, free folk beyond walls, Traders from across seas, Renly began, voice amplified by cunning arrangement of horncups around stage. Winter's specter recedes, but wounds remain. We gather not to claim shards of a broken throne. We gather to forge new steel from it. He spread arms. The compact of dawn stands before you. A blueprint to bind realms against terrors we now know lurk in deep ages. Speak. Confirm. Amend. But above all, remember the ice that nearly sealed our tongues forever. Murmurs. Then Prince Doran Martell's steward raised a parchment, citing centuries of Dornish independence. We lost no harvest to frost. Why pledge grain beyond our desert's means? Daenerys stepped forward. Dorne's sun burns hard, she said. But winter's shadow cooled Qarth last year. Merchants speak of frost where sand should scorch. The world narrows, no corner remains untouched. Aid shared now may buy survival later. Her Valyrian accent lent the words music enough to soften some stiff spines. Next, the ironborn Captain Harlan Pike pounded half to floor. We sailed to smash white ships off Skagos, lost hulls and sons. When recompense flows, Jon answered, your sons saved my men. In the north, debts repay with standing tide. You hold fishing rights north of Skagos for 5 years. Signed yesterday. Harlan nodded, surprised. Discussion turned to coin, to representation. Lady Mormont, small but roaring, insisted free folk granted vote. Tormund bellowed agreement until benches shook. Lords bristled, but Bran Stark, warging a raven perched above dais, announced in echoing voice, if we ignore voices once silenced, they will return in screams. The effect, a child speaking through bird, unnerved holdouts into wary consent. Stannis finally spoke. Who wields final sword when dispute festers? A council may deliberate until rot sets in. Ben shall. Jon removed Lightbringer's scabbard, placing flaming sword on table alongside Daenerys' pocket-sized dragonhorn, gifted by Qarth traders. Fire and ice share watch, he said. Any matter deadlocked returns north, where Compact's founders adjudicate with eyes not dulled by southern feuds. He looked around. The throne is no longer seat of one. It's a desk of many, and these, he indicated sword and horn, remind what silence costs. Debate roared, flared, cooled, and by night's third hour, scrolls bore signatures enough to declare ratification. At torchlit midnight, Tyrion read final count. 6 of 7 kingdoms plus Free Folk Conclave and Iron Isles. Stormlands and Crownlands under Renly joined. Stannis appended signature after inserting clause ensuring road tolls fund watch restorations. He signed with sardonic flourish. If Dawn fails, at least lines were drawn straight, he muttered. As Dawn's first pale wash painted bitter bridge, Renly raised a goblet. All hail the companions of Dawn, Queen Daenerys Stormborn, and King Jonathan of House Stark. Applause thundered, though some lords clapped palms to blades out of reflex. Daenerys and Jon clasped hands, high for all to witness. Dragons circled overhead, roaring a chorus that rattled rafters louder than any trumpet. Nights thereafter brimmed with revels yet also negotiations. Aedys Karstark hammered pact with Greyjoys to trade whale oil for first-grow oats. Dornish envoys shared citrus seedlings hardy enough for Riverland soil. The Faith militant attempted to arrest a Qarthine aromancer for heresy. Arya intervened with Dawn Guard, diffusing tensions by challenging the devout to read Sam's treatise under truce. They agreed grudgingly. Some left with minds widened like gates, others with thicker shutters. On the Moot's final morning, Bran summoned key figures to a grove beyond camp, where a single old oak split into 2 trunks that twined back to one canopy. Under rustling green he spoke softly. The flame and frost that sealed our night still flicker in fragments. Ice shards hide in deep caves scattered across the world. Each could seed a new winter. I cannot watch all roots, but guardians can. He unveiled a plan. An order of lanterns, scholars, rangers, healers, stationed at outposts along mountain spines and sea deeps, sworn to study signs of unnatural cold or heat. Each outpost would host one dragon egg from Daenerys' stores at Dragonstone. She still kept 9 petrified relics gifted by Illyrio. Should a lantern flame turn blue, the egg would warm to warn dragons roosting at Valeria's restored perch. A fail-safe across ages. Daenerys regarded the cracked eggs with reverence. Dragons as watchfires, she said. Let them be beacons, not bombs. Tyrion calculated quills. Funding comes from levies on luxury silks and arbor glass. Those who profit most from peace will pay to keep it. Lords grumbled but conceded. Margins were high enough to shave. And months flowed like meltwater, carving new gullies. Grasses sprouted along roads once buried. Small folk thronged reopened markets, trading icicle-hulled furs for saffron seeds. Sailors brought from Lys. White Harbor's quays boomed. Braavosi and Pentoshi merchants sought dragonglass jewelry etched by dwarven gemsmiths. A song spread on lutes, when Robert's hammer fell on ice praising the late king's sacrifice. Even septons of the most devout sang it, though quietly lest Renly's court think him overshadowed. Yet not all dawn's rays reached every corner. In the ruins of Carhold, a smoldering keep awaiting reconstruction, 3 silhouettes knelt around a chest, bound by blue steel chains. They wore mottled cloaks stitched from white skin, faces hidden behind masks carved from weirwood with eyes hollowed. One murmured in cracked whisper, "The shard from Harrenhal breathes still." They pried the chest. Inside glowed a shard of night, king's crown, faint azure pulses reflecting in their eyeholes. Another presented a flask of darkened blood, pilfered from Stannis' forge. The moment Lightbringer cooled, they poured it over shard. The glow surged brighter, casting skeletal shadows. "Seedbed," croaked the first. They replaced lid, hoisted chest, and vanished into snowy dusk where the sun's disk looked thin, as if gnawed by frostwolves. Far south, Melisandre sensed flames shiver. She stood on Dragonstone's wind-battered battlement, hair aflame in sunset, and whispered to Red God, "Light must always feed. Shadows always hunger. This we know." She dispatched a raven to Jon and Daenerys. "Gunly blue heart beats again. Seek under stones where wolves once howled at midnight sun." And at Castle Black, Samwell Tarly oversaw a scholar convoy depositing crates of glass candles, old Valyrian devices that once allowed minds to speak across leagues. Maester Luwin's apprentices wired them to mirrored dishes catching dawnlight. When Jon visited, Sam explained, "If we master their flare frequency, lantern outposts can alert the watch instantly." Jon clasped Sam's shoulders. "You build a spine of light," he said. "May nerves run swift." On his way south, Jon paused at Wintertown's rebuilt tavern, the Stag and Direwolf, to drink mulled cider with Gendry Waters, now master smith of Winterfell's new foundry. Gendry displayed prototypes, armor laced with fine dragonglass filaments weaving between steel layers. Lightweight, shatters ice flesh without compromising plate, he boasted. Banging gauntlet against table. Mud jumped, but did not spill. Jon grinned. "You just saved many fingers from frostbite." As Jon mounted to depart, he spotted a trio of children carving snow statues. One of a dragon, one of a wolf, one of a blue-eyed giant shattering into dust. He knelt, asking their names. The smallest, a girl missing 2 front teeth, piped, "Lyanna!" He ruffled her hair, heart thrumming with ghosts and hope. And now, the first anniversary of the Frostmother's fall dawned under bright skies unmarred by ash or auroras. In King's Landing, bells pealed across spired rooftops as Renly and Margaery processed through streets blossoming with tapestries depicting suns rising over deer wolves. In Old Town, the Citadel inducted its inaugural class of lantern acolytes, forging copper torques shaped like entwined flame and snowflakes. In Meereen, reborn after civil strife, freedmen lit pyres of fragrant cedar to honor a queen who once freed them and now guarded a realm far away. On Dragonstone, Daenerys and Jon wed, upon an obsidian terrace above thrashing surf. Varys scouted guest list, Sansa Stark sewed wedding cloak from direwolf and red silk patches. The High Septon presided, though he ceded part of ceremony to a northern shaman brandishing weirwood branch, and to Melisandre wielding flaming brazier. 3 faiths plated, dragons crowned sky. When Jon drew Daenerys' hand into his, Lightbringer, propped behind them, flared once, as if blessing forged union. That night, stars mirrored bonfires across bay. Musicians played Dornish ballads. Tormund danced with Brienne of Tarth until both collapsed laughing. Tyrion toasted each improbable friendship until his words slurred, yet his mind remained crystal. In dawn's afterglow, may we not trip over our own shadows. Later, Daenerys and Jon stood alone where surf hissed at black cliffs. She rested her head on his shoulder. He inhaled sea air saltier than tears. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we begin building rather than breaking." He kissed her silver hair. "Tomorrow," he echoed. Behind them, Lightbringer dimmed to dull amber, the calm heartbeat of a sword content for now. But across narrow sea, in ruined Volantris catacombs, a blue shard thumped like distant war drums. And so dawn held on the horizon, bright yet fragile, the line between warmth and chill ever thin, urging sentinels to stay vigilant. Hearts to remember the price of forgetting. And how? 5 years flowed. Wheat swayed in fields south of the Gift, where once only scrub survived. Giants, few but enduring, returned to Rome foothills, guided by dawn guard wardens, ensuring sheep farmers kept respectful distance. Free folk children learned trade maths in new stone schoolhouses alongside flint-eyed northern bairns. Dragons nested on Dragonstone's volcanic slopes, each adult paired with a dawn guard rider. Men and women chosen for empathy over bloodline. Daenerys allowed no more than 1 clutch to hatch each decade, lest skies overcrowd. In King's Landing, Tyrion's lantern excise-funded roads, bridging western mountains with Crown Coast. Carrying Dornish citrus, north and Shield Islands cod south. The faith militant disbanded voluntarily after Moot placed spiritual guidance under joint Septon shaman conclave. People still gossiped of miracles and portents, but they looked to lantern outposts for answers rather than whispers. Yet hush of new war brewed quietly. Lantern outpost Frostgate, perched on cliffs above Sea of Sighs, reported missing glass candles. Ranger tracks found nothing but boot prints that stopped mid-trail. In Stonehelm, local fishermen pulled nets tangled with weirwood masks, afloat where no tree grew. And on the lonely light, the Ironborn far west, a shepherd boy discovered a chest of blue steel chains half buried in turf. When he touched its cold surface, he dreamed of antlered shadows stalking moonlit snow. News reached White Harbor just as House Manderly hosted annual Dawn Fair. Jon, attending without Daenerys, who tended eggs soon to hatch, met with Davos Seaworth upon the harbor ramparts. Davos unfolded a salt-stiff map, pinpointing disappearances. All trace rose earlier each decade, he said, tapping inked circles, like tides swelling. Jon's stomach clenched. The last 5-year period should have shown calm. Instead, the pattern hinted at gathering. That night, Jon lit a glass candle retrieved from Frostgate. Emerald flame danced. He closed his eyes. Spoke Daenerys' name. Across the sea, she stirred from Roose chamber, feeling mind touch like warm wind. They shared images, weirwood masks, blue steel chest, blood still pulsing under ice. She responded, with single thought. Come. Within fortnight, the Dawn Council convened on Dragonstone. Bran arrived borne by wyvern-drawn sledge, his eyes clouded by long warging. Sam brought codices referencing elder cult of the Bleak Antler. Followers who worshipped the Frost Mother's womb as source of eternal cycle. Scattered but never stamped, he explained. When one cycle ends, cult goes dormant, seeding symbols for next rise. Tyrion poured dark ale. We underestimated fanatics' hunger to restore old nightmares. Bran's ravens hopped restlessly, screeching. Through them, he spoke. They feed shards with king's blood. Not lineage of crown, but the will to lead. If they drain enough such will, Shards may knit a mind anew. Jon's blood chilled. They steal from lantern captains, people sworn to guard realm. Daenerys' jaw set. Then we trace bloodlines of will. Not kings and castles, but those who hold trust. Lanterns, mayors, midwives, smiths coaxing steel to shape. Over days they mapped abductions. A Dawn Guard quartermaster near Sea Dragon Point. A wise woman from Bear Island. A free folk chieftain's daughter. All spirited away, leaving blue rose petals, rare north of neck, at abduction sites. Blue roses, Jon muttered, remembering stories of Lyanna. Bran shook his head. These are no wolf's garden. They are Frostmother's tears. Petals frozen, dyed in blood, then cooled into blue. The council authorized a covert hunt. Arya led faceless scouts. Gendry forged dragonglass-lined shackles. Dragons ferried rangers to remote coasts where suspicious lantern flickers signaled cunning traps. Each mission rescued victims etched with frostbite runes, but chest shards remained elusive. It was Ghost who finally scented trail on the slopes of Skagos. While patrolling with Dawn Guard, he nosed wind heavy with copper tang. Jon followed, Lightbringer leaping to life in his grip. They tracked to a glacier fissure where masked cultists knelt around cauldron of black ice, swirling with faint blue light. At cauldron's center floated the Harrenhal shard, larger now, veins of red weaving through azure. Battle erupted. Dragonglass arrows piercing cloaks, wolves tearing masks. Jon confronted cult's leader, a gaunt woman whose skin shimmered frost. She hissed a chant. Cycle unbroken, bride of ice reborn. Blue fire burst from her palms, his cloak singed. He thrust Lightbringer through her chest. She disintegrated into snow motes. Yet the shard writhed, absorbing her essence, glow intensifying. Bran's ravens stormed overhead. Through their chorus he yelled, "Blood alone will sate, yours." Jon hesitated, remembering Forge of Lightbringer. He'd spilled blood to birth dawn, perhaps must spill again to avert midnight. He slashed his palm, letting crimson drip into cauldron. The shard cracked, shrieked like splitting glaciers, then imploded into powder that hissed into steam. Silence fell heavy. Ghost whined soft. Lantern scouts gathered survivors, but questions lingered. How many shards still scattered? What cost next time? Jon wrapped his hand. Blood still oozed despite bindings. Lightbringer's flame, once bright, now flickered. He whispered to Bran's raven. Cycle maybe ends only when memory endures. The bird croaked assent. In years that followed, memory became Westeros' greatest forge. Children in Storm's End learned freeze response drills alongside swordplay. Citadel apprentices studied ice sigils next to healing herbs. At Harvest Moot each decade, leaders recounted tale of Robert's hammer, of Frostmother's cry, of shard hunts. Bards sang not just of battles won but vigilance maintained. Jon and Daenerys aged. Silver and charcoal threading hair. Yet their bond knitted deeper. They bore 2 children, a daughter with eyes like dawnlit sea, a son with laugh like hearth crackle. Dragons watched them toddle among volcanic roses. The realm thrummed with fragile harmony. One crisp evening, decades after first dawn, Jon stood again atop the wall. Restored, though now half its height and strengthened with basalt buttresses and lantern spires. A new recruit of Dawn Guard approached, saluted. Reports clear, Your Grace. Lanterns shine steady. Jon nodded, gaze settling on horizon. Stars glittered cold, yet friendly. He recalled a night when they seemed weapons against humanity. Footsteps behind, Daenerys, cloak billowing dragon-scale embroidery. She slipped gloved hand into his. Both bore matching white scars on palms, symbols of sacrifices past. She asked, "Do you still dream of snowstorms walking?" He squeezed her hand. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I wake to dragon purrs and children's quarrels." Storms recede. Soft rustle overhead. Bran's ravens circled, one landing on parapet. It croaked. Sound uncanny like laughter. Jon exhaled. Bird says, peace, I think. Daenerys looked out over dark forests quilted silver by moon. Fires of free folk villages twinkled among pines. Ships' lanterns dotted bay beyond Eastwatch. She whispered, when cycles turn again, and they will, let our memories stand as lantern for those not yet born. Jon nodded, feeling Scar warm faintly as if sword still lived inside. A lantern bright enough to pierce any night, he said. They watched sky together until horizon glowed with first blush of yet another dawn. One more in a chain they forged day by day, aware that vigilance and love, like steel and flame, require constant tending or rust and ash reclaim them. Above, dragons soared on morning thermals, silhouettes vast yet gentle. Guardians etched against softening hues, reminding all below that balance between fire and ice, like between hope and fear, remains forever aloft, anchored only by hearts brave enough to carry it. And thus the Northern Crusade, that began with Robert Baratheon's sober fury, rippled outward, shaping ages, proving that even shattered crowns can melt into common purpose, that swords tempered in sacrifice can become plowshares of peace, and that the brightest dawn springs, not from the absence of darkness, but from hands that refuse to let its shadow fall unchallenged.